extortion, blackmail, corruption, little yellow ducks. Paid for reviews. The tabletop gaming world has been rocked recently by allegations from a big gaming company that a major YouTuber tried to extort them, demanding $7,500, a pretty enormous sum of money. All of this in return for not publishing videos that were critical of a game that company is currently kickstarting. That's right, there is some major drama llama in the community. It's caused a huge controversy in the tabletop game community. Reddit threads have been opened and deleted. Pundits have weighed in on Twitter. YouTube videos are being inundated with drama comments, and unscrupulous YouTubers everywhere are scratching their head and saying, wow, that's a lot of money. I gotta up my blackmail rates. This is huge, and it's getting bigger. It's blowing up. Frankly, it's getting pretty nasty out there on the internet right now, especially for influencers. So what the hell is going on? Firstly, this is Aeon Trespass, a huge miniature-based board game in the style of Kingdom Death Monster, where players work cooperatively to fight giant monsters and build bases, and it's a hugely expensive product, coming with a huge bundle of game components, miniatures, and expansions. Classic Kickstarter fodder. About 2 weeks left to go on its Kickstarter for a second printing, and it's already made over £2 million sterling. It's very popular. I personally haven't played it, but according to Board Game Geek, the arbiter of all the true correct opinions, it's been rated a 9.3 out of 10. So I think it's fair to say that people enjoy the gameplay, or at the very least are hopeful that they will enjoy the gameplay if they can ever convince their friends to play it with them. Still, there's some pretty sweet looking miniatures in here. The company behind this product is called Into the Unknown, and they have one other game to their name, but really, they're mostly known for Aeon Trespass Odyssey. Full disclosure here, I don't have any relationship with them whatsoever. I've never worked with them. Now, this has gone beyond the realm of drama and into some pretty gnarly stuff. This all kicked off, publicly at least, when the CEO of Into the Unknown, Marcin Welnicki, apologies for pronouncing that incorrectly, responded to a commenter on their Aeon Trespass Kickstarter who mentioned a negative review of their product by a big game YouTuber. Their response said, not if, for example, a YouTuber contacts you months in advance to say they have shot the content, don't like the game, but they can reshoot it for $7,500. We would not respond well to such a proposition. Winky face. In fact, we would never work with someone like that again. And then in a later comment, Marcin followed up saying that he has the receipts to prove this, answering the age-old internet challenge of pics or didn't happen. This was then picked up by commenters and Reddit, all of them saying that Into the Unknown were allegedly the victims of blackmail or extortion by a YouTuber, and people ran wild with this. Now, regardless of what you want to call this allegation, it's a pretty serious one, and it describes unethical, dishonest, and threatening behavior. The bones of it are that essentially a content creator has said to Into the Unknown that they have created content about how they don't like the game, and then asked for $7,500 in order to reshoot it to be more positive. A pretty damning allegation. Now, the YouTuber that this is alleged about is called Quackalope. This is a well-known, mostly board game content creator, and their logo and their thing are rubber ducks. So, quack quack. Now, as influencers, they're not quite as big as board game institutions like the Dice Tower, no pun included, or Shut Up and Sit Down. But they're not small. And again, full disclosure, I don't know them. I've never interacted with Quackalope or Jesse, who runs the channel. I've watched a video or two in the past, but not a lot. I do know that Quackalope have been around for years, though, and they're bigger than me. They currently sit on 48k subscribers. Or they did before this scandal broke out. They're down to 45k now at time of recording, but by the time this reaches you, they've probably dropped even more. Now, incidentally, Quackalope have also recently released a review of Aeon Trespass called, quote, The Horrible Truth of Aeon Trespass Odyssey. And in the thumbnail of this review, they have a picture saying that it's unplayable. Now remember, this is for a game that has been pretty well received generally, so this is a pretty bad look for Quackalope right now, especially when it comes to these allegations. But then, it got a little spicy, because on that video calling Aeon Trespass unplayable, Quackalope responded to the allegations from Into the Unknown, categorically refuting the claims in a pinned comment that's still up right now at time of recording. In this comment, Quackalope say that they have never asked a publisher to pay in order to prevent critical or negative content. They acknowledge that they have worked with companies to cover games, but they only ever charge for their time, not opinions, and that they're clear when they have a financial relationship with a publisher. They explicitly say that they never asked Into the Unknown to pay them to keep videos from going public or showed the videos to Into the Unknown. But they do acknowledge that they did ask Into the Unknown to collaborate with them to get, quote, accurate coverage, but not necessarily a positive review. They confirm that they were in touch with Into the Unknown, but state that ITU did say that they were interested in working with Quackalope, but needed the coverage from the channel to be positive, as well as some other stipulations. And then, Quackalope say they'll live stream on June the 12th, where they are happy to answer questions. Well, that's going to be a pretty spicy live stream, I imagine, because right after Quackalope published this statement, Into the Unknown then released all of their private emails with Quackalope, and it looks really bad for Quackalope. Now, before we go any further, I must put all of my cards on the table. I work with sponsors sometimes too. On this channel, I feature products in return for payment. I create content full time, and I wish I could sustain the channel via Patreon or crowdfunding and just YouTube revenue only, but I can't. This isn't viable for me without taking the occasional sponsorship. If you want to help me change that, check out my Patreon at patreon.com/discoursminiatures. But I've always operated on the principle that it should always be clear when I'm being sponsored to say something. It's important that viewers know that. I never do reviews for payment, and I prefer to stray away from fully sponsored videos when I can, instead inserting them into existing videos about topics that I already wanted to talk about. It's important to me that viewers know when I'm giving my own authentic opinion, or when I'm being paid, like right now, by Dragon Trappers Lodge. This month, the Dragon Trappers Lodge is releasing the Darkwoods miniature line, all for only $12 on their Patreon, link in the description below. These STL files are all based on the Unseelie realm and fairy stories. Fairies are big in Ireland, and as an Irish native, I can assure you that these miniatures accurately capture the likeness of the average person I see on my daily commute into town, especially this one. There's a really varied army here based on spooky forests, evil dryads, and old crones. These miniatures are a complete army, playable in one-page rules, and even come with free rules to do so. As an army, they're all about traversing difficult terrain easily, and even using terrain features to frustrate and hamper their opponent. And they even bring along their own evil trees to help them with that. You'll be winning games in no time. Discourse Minis cannot guarantee any wins. Player skill will apply. And if you've ever wanted to own sculpts of the Games Workshop painting staff, then the possibility to do so is at hand. Dragon Trappers Lodge are also releasing the Multiverse of Madness, a bundle of extremely oddball and interesting miniatures that have gotten completely out of hand. And they even come with rules to use them in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition too. All of these STL files can also be gotten for only $12 from the Dragon Trappers Lodge Patreon, unless you sign up to the veteran tier, in which case you get both the Multiverse of Madness and the Darkwoods together. So check out the link below and get your hands on some awesome miniatures. I'm getting to be a bit of a dab hand at those sponsorships, huh? But a sponsorship like that, an insert into an existing video, that's one thing. But it's quite another to tell a company that you have created negative content and you will publish it unless they give you money. And that's exactly what Into the Unknown have alleged Quackalope did. And now they've released the emails that they say proves it. And the internet has run wild with these and gone absolutely pretty, I'd say in some corners of the internet, pretty unhinged. But do those emails actually show that claim to be the case? The internet certainly seems to think so and has exploded in condemnation of Quackalope. But I'm not as convinced, actually. I've been looking into this topic and doing some sleuthing, and there's some stuff that just isn't adding up to me. But first, let's get into the juicy emails released by Into the Unknown first. These emails cover weeks of correspondence between Quackalope and Into the Unknown, so I'm not gonna go through every single email. There's a link in the description of this video that will link you to a copy of all of them. But I will go into a high-level overview of the conversation and pick out the relevant parts parts for our purposes. Also, by the way, the emails I'm about to show you have sections that have been highlighted. This wasn't done by me. This was done by Into the Unknown themselves. I kind of wish they hadn't done this. It's sort of weird to me, but whatever. And also, Into the Unknown provided a statement alongside these emails when they released them. And I'm going to touch on that statement while we go through this because I actually think that Into the Unknown are telling some porky pies. They're not being totally accurate about what went down in these emails, either on purpose or by accident. So yes, this is all about to get very spicy. Here's the first email. This is from Quackalope to Into the Unknown. Jesse is the main guy of Quackalope and Marcin is the CEO of Into the Unknown, or ITU. And this email is sent in January 19th of 2023. Remember that date. The timing of these emails is very important. Now, in the email itself, Quackalope give a standard intro. They say hi. They say they'd love to work with ITU. They ask ITU to sponsor 5 videos about their game Aeon Trespass. And Quackalope make it clear that they would like to schedule a call with ITU to learn the rules of the game. Quackalope also say that they normally charge $2,500 per video. Now, firstly, $2,500 is a pretty wild amount of money. I mean, get that bread. But boy, that's a lot. I mean, I need to really rethink some of my own rates, I guess, because that is astronomically more than anything I have ever charged anyone for anything. Now, Quackalope are a little cheeky in this email. Got a little bit of cheek to them. They do the old upsell on ITU, saying that rather than charge $2,500 for a single video, they could do 5 videos at $1,500 each. Ho ho ho, clever, clever. That's a little bit cheeky, but importantly, this is where the original $7,500 number comes from ITU's original claim in that Kickstarter comment. And for this money, Quackalope proposed in the original email that those 5 videos would be about gameplay, tips and tricks, a strategy guide, and preview for the Kickstarter. So they don't say that they'll review the game as part of the sponsorship, which is fair. Then the next email that ITU show is this one, dated the 3rd of February. That's 2.5 weeks after the initial email Quackalope sent. And that timing is super important because in the statement alongside these emails, ITU say that it was Quackalope who waited 2 weeks to respond to ITU. But that's not necessarily true. The second email is from Quackalope to ITU, sure, but Quackalope here is responding to an email from ITU that was sent in the interim. An email that we don't have the date for. There is this gap of 2.5 weeks and we have no idea what happened in that. Now, this might sound a little bit pedantic, but I think the timing of these emails is really important when we interpret Quackalope's rationale for what he's gonna say next. So in that interim email, ITU basically say sorry for the late reply. They say that $1,500 for a video is pretty steep, but you know, maybe they could go for a single pilot video at that price. But they say that they have some questions and requirements. Then they ask some pretty bog standard questions like turnaround time for the videos, how long would the videos be, and what type of content would it be. In the very next email then, the one that we have the date for, Quackalope responds to ITU's questions by saying that in the week since they have sent that email out, asking to be sponsored to create content for ITU, Quackalope have gone ahead and made content on their own back, spending, quote, 50 hours learning, tabling, and recording content. They say that they're frustrated with the game and struggling with the rules and found it very complicated, which is bad because they really wanted to like it and think that the campaign could be amazing. Then Quackalope say that if they are going to move forward, they'd need one of the designers from Into the Unknown to watch their content or come film with them to make sure that they're getting all the rules right because they've struggled and are worried about the community picking apart all their rules mistakes. Oh, sure wouldn't like some nasty YouTube comments right now. Then the smoking gun. This bit is where the alleged blackmail, extortion, whatever you want to call it happens. Quackalope says this. Quote, if we are working in collaboration with you, we would scrap the footage we have already recorded since we want to be as accurate as possible. If we decide to work independently, we will likely not invest more time beyond the 50 hours of content and 8 videos that we have already recorded. This is what ITU refer to in their accompanying statement as, quote, changing the tone of the conversation. And it's what a lot of the internet are calling extortion. But I'm gonna have to be honest here, as a content creator, this reads more to me like, hey, I have spent 50 hours recording a bunch of content about this game. I'm probably not going to revisit it. If you want me to, you'll have to pay me to do so. Also, I didn't really enjoy my time with the game, so the content I've made is probably going to be a negative review. And I think that's how it was intended by Quackalope, but clearly ITU has interpreted this as a threat. Now, let's be clear, this doesn't look good for Quackalope at all, but I understand where I think they're coming from. But honestly, Quackalope shouldn't have said this. See, here's where that 2-week gap I mentioned comes in and is super relevant. So as a content creator, I want to make content about lots of different stuff. And hey, if I get paid to do so, then that's gravy. But I might make it anyway. I might have always made that content. Paid or not, it seems like Quackalope wanted to make content around Aeon Trespass, presumably because they thought it would get views or they really did just want to play the game. This all seems to me like they sent out the original email asking for a sponsorship, then they didn't hear anything back, so they assumed that there was no interest from the publisher in sponsoring their content, which isn't rare at all. And so in the weeks between these two emails, Quackalope just went ahead and started making content anyway. This means that when ITU get back to Quackalope weeks later, Quackalope are in a situation where they've filmed content already, and now this company are trying to negotiate rates and prices for sponsored footage. This is partly why I think ITU were the ones who were slow to respond to Quackalope in those 2 weeks, by the way. And also, ITU do say in the very next email, hey Jesse, thanks for getting back to us on a short notice. So that really implies to me that Quackalope were very quick to respond to the email from ITU, and maybe ITU were a little bit slower. This is contrary to how ITU have presented the 2-week gap in their statement. They talk as if it was Quackalope's fault, as if there was this gap where Quackalope were kind of creating content and not getting back to ITU. But to me, it's really important that that isn't the case, because that gap explains the rationale for why Quackalope created this negative content. If ITU had responded right after his original email saying, hey, let's negotiate rates, we don't want to pay so much for so many videos, what can you do for pricing? And then Quackalope created negative content and said, you have to pay us or else. That would prove to me that Quackalope are acting maliciously and that their goal was to extort ITU, which is really important. The state of mind, the intention of the parties is the most important part when it comes to blackmail and extortion. But in this case, I don't think that's the case. I'm suspicious of the way that ITU present this case. It feels one-sided. Now, moving on, in the next email, ITU say that if Quackalope had struggled with the rules a lot, which Quackalope say that they did, quote, a lot of the content you've already created could be unusable. And that statement kind of rubs me the wrong way a little bit. I mean, that's not how this works. If I'm a creator and I've created content about a game and I struggle to understand the rules, then that is 100% relevant to the critique or gameplay video that I'm creating. Whenever I create content about games, you're going to get my authentic experience with those games. I'm not going to scrap it because I found your rulebook hard to parse. In fact, ITU say in the same email, quote, we might skip this Aeon Trespass review altogether and swiftly move towards the future. And then they detail a bunch of their upcoming projects that would be, quote, a chance for you to be there at the ground floor. Which, honestly, if I wanted to be uncharitable, that could be interpreted as basically, don't release negative content of our game or else we won't work with you in the future. And that is a very uncharitable way to interpret this, but it's as uncharitable, I think, as the original interpretation of Quackalope's emails too. Quackalope then goes on to ask to set up a video call to actually talk about this in digital person. They say that they're interested in working in the future and will be happy to create content to any parameters that ITU want, like, for example, not producing critical or review-based media. And they say they'd love a member of the ITU team to observe a live session of their gameplay so that they can double-check the rules questions that Quackalope might have. And to me, that kind of speaks to the fact that Quackalope's problems with the rules were real and not made up simply to extort ITU. Then, Quackalope asked for a meeting. And so those emails took place in early February, and from what I can tell, it's not until March 31st, so potentially 2 months later, that ITU get back to Quackalope, basically saying that they've been sick, that's why they didn't get back to Quackalope sooner, but also that they would be interested in commissioning a video and they could have a team member answer questions. And then, into the unknown, agree to paying $1,500 for a pilot video. So I'm noting that down. That's a good price. That's some good numbers. Alert the bank. And then Quackalope Quackalope respond by saying, sorry, we've released that content we mentioned in the meantime. Now, this later email, the one from March from ITU, is really interesting to me because really, the original conversation had ended after Quackalope asked for a meeting back in February, right? But then, months later, Into the Unknown actively go back to Quackalope and request a video. And this speaks, honestly, to me, of Into the Unknown's perception of what was going on in this conversation, and it speaks to whether they did or did not feel threatened or extorted or blackmailed. I read these emails as a third-party neutral observer, and I don't get that impression. It sounds to me like months later, Into the Unknown are happy to work with Quackalope, and they ask to commission a video. Now, I'm not trying to blame anybody, and obviously these are emails from non-native English speakers, so this is always going to be hard to interpret, and a lot of this is based on us trying to interpret rationale and intent, so we're picking up context clues. But for me, if I felt like someone was trying to extort me, I'd cut communication with them. I'd want nothing to do with them. I certainly wouldn't commission them to make content for me. I certainly wouldn't go back to an email thread from at least a month ago to open up the conversation again. I wouldn't want to speak with this person, and I would be incredibly offended. I find this reaction from Into the Unknown, frankly, that's pretty weird. In the statement from them, they said they felt pushed to a wall because, quote, Quackalope was the biggest board game channel with a lot of sway. But let's be honest here. We're not dealing with a vulnerable person or even a small company. Into the Unknown are a big company. They're handling millions of dollars. And the fact that in their statement, they tried to ping at our heartstrings with a quote, if we were a smaller company, this would have impacted our company, games, and employees. They're basically alluding here that Quackalope's critical coverage of Aeon Trespass would have killed the game if they were a smaller company. And man, that really rubs me the wrong way. I don't like that. That's emotional blackmail. A critic's obligation is not to keep people in jobs. It's to their audience. Bad games exist. I wish it were otherwise, but it's true. And those games are made by companies of people who are employed. And it's not fair to lay into critics with an accusation that those critics are responsible for people potentially losing their jobs if all those critics are trying to inform consumers as to whether something is good or not in their opinion. So long as that opinion is presented ethically, honestly, accurately, and in good faith. Bad games deserve to be highlighted. Consumers deserve to know that. I feel like Quackalope has been mischaracterized a little in all of this drama, that their words have been ascribed with more maliciousness than maybe was intended. And I think both parties have communicated honestly pretty poorly. I try not to ascribe maliciousness to that which can be explained by food in mouth, and I feel like that's what's happened in this instance. For Quackalope, I don't think they realized how their offer came across as a, hey, perfectly lovely game you got here. Would be a real shame if someone were to make a negative review. And I honestly just don't believe that they intended it to be taken that way. The original claim from Into the Unknown made it sound like Quackalope offered to do a re-review of Aeon Trespass in exchange for money. But in these emails, Quackalope come across to me as more like they're offering to just simply restart their playthrough with a better grasp of the rules, led by a member of the Into the Unknown design team, but only if Quackalope get paid to do so and spend the time doing it. For me, what's more damning is that Quackalope appear to be fine with the idea of changing their coverage of a game once money has gotten involved. Basically, I can't read these emails any other way than simply Quackalope saying, we will give a dishonest opinion about your game for the right amount of cash. And asking a publisher for money to tweak or revisit content that has already been recorded, that you have already come to an opinion on, absolutely tarnishes the credibility and authenticity of a critic. And critics, pundits, reviewers, whatever you want to call them, all they have is their credibility, trustworthiness, and authenticity. If those go, a critic has nothing. Why should anyone trust the word of a critic whose voice is for sale in that way? It's why I personally don't do sponsored reviews. In fact, it's why I believe that the term paid review is an oxymoron. And I've absolutely rejected requests from companies to review content on this channel for money, or to provide sponsored segments on products that I think are not good for consumers, or that I myself personally would not use, because it's unethical. But also, it's a death sentence for a channel, which Quackalope might be finding out for themselves right about now. now. I mean, I don't know how they come back from this one, honestly. The internet has not been kind to all of this. You want to call it drama? I call it a potential legal case. I think what is especially damning here as well is that Quackalope's problem with the game is that they found the rules extremely difficult to parse. That they couldn't quite grasp the rules, that they found it almost impossible to play. As they say, unplayable. And that's absolutely something I would want to know as a consumer. If a reviewer feels like they need the publisher and designer to be in the room with them so that they can get the rules right of the game, that is absolutely super important for me as a random consumer who will not have that privilege to know. Especially if I'm dropping hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars on it like Aeon Trespass costs. We're talking about a game here that at its most expensive can be $300 for the core game and all of the expansions. That's a lot of money. Now, I think mixed in with a lot of the criticism of Quackalope and these allegations of blackmail, and I think one of the things that's been really damning for Quackalope and does not look good for them at all is that they've been pretty damning of the game in their negative coverage. And that, for many, is seen as a smoking gun, as evidence of the fact that Quackalope were looking to extort into the unknown. Especially considering that Aeon Trespass has like a 9.3 out of 10 on Board Game Geek. And I don't really have a lot of sympathy for this argument because, let's be honest, people can dislike games that are very popular or games that have a large population of enthusiasts. There are different demographics, there are different people, and we will all be into different things. We are all unequal in our own tastes and experiences, and it's not in and of itself any evidence of anything if a critic dislikes a popular piece of media. If Jesse at Quackalope doesn't like Aeon Trespass, it doesn't matter if the game has tons of fans or a really high score on Board Game Geek. Board Game Geek scoring isn't an objective measure of anything other than that's what people on Board Game Geek voted for. This is the same problem with platforms like Metacritic. I just don't trust these types of websites, I'm sorry. Also, while Quackalope has indeed released a video that is very critical of Aeon Trespass Odyssey, which some people will pejoratively call a negative review, which I don't really care about that kind of classification of whether something's positive or negative, so long as it's honest and authentic. He has also released a video called Aeon Trespass Odyssey is a masterpiece, which, gonna be honest, doesn't really do him any favors. That's a confusing series of videos to release. One video says the game is amazing, the other says it's terrible. I mean, you can't open yourself up to being negative or positive at that stage. These are two contradictory perspectives, so seeing them side by side is pretty jarring. When I first saw these series of videos, I was really confused. But this is actually part of a strategy of Quackalope's releases. It's part of a series that they call confirmation bias, where they'll release two videos on the same game, one super positive, the other super negative. So this isn't unusual for them. Okay, I can't help myself. Here's a little unasked for advice from one content creator to another. This is a bad idea. I don't know why you would do this to yourself. Most viewers just click videos that are recommended to them on their homepage. So they do not see your channel, they don't see the other videos that you have made. They'll be going into each of these videos in a vacuum. This format is going to be really confusing to most viewers, and they'll come away from one of these videos thinking that the game is either all good or all bad. And the comments on both videos, oh god, they're all going to be pointing out the opposite points of what you say, things that you probably address in your other alternative viewpoint video. This video format is just going to be a nightmare. Why would you do this to yourself? Don't do this. Don't structure videos like this. Just do one. Just do a single video talking honestly and openly about what the game gets right and wrong. Releasing two contradictory videos is weird, it's confusing, and it looks very inauthentic. Sorry about that for that tangent, guys. I couldn't help myself, okay? But the point I'm trying to make is that Quackalope did do a positive video on Aeon Trespass Odyssey as well as a negative one, even though they weren't paid $7,500, I guess. So it's not like their coverage was just all one way. And I want to touch on something that hasn't really been picked up by the internet. It hasn't become part of the narrative that has formed around these events. But I want to talk about it because I don't think that Into the Unknown Unknown emerged from this event unscathed either. The fact of the matter is, they were happy to pay for content from Quackalope. And honestly, from their language in the emails, they seemingly feel very defensive about their product. And I do feel like they blew this interaction out of proportion. And they left out crucial information, presenting some half-truths in their reporting of these events that make Quackalope look a lot worse in my opinion. And that has shaped a huge internet pile-on. There is a lot of hate right now for Quackalope on the internet, especially Reddit was extremely vicious and bordering on anti-Semitic. A lot of it driven by the original impression given that Quackalope had created content that was negative about Aeon Trespass and then reached out to Into the Unknown and said, hey, we'll blow up your game unless you give us money. Whereas I think that once you read the emails, it's a far more complicated, nuanced situation that strikes me more as a miscommunication than a malicious threat. Remember, the content from Quackalope was recorded after the initial brokerage for sponsorship was made to Into the Unknown, but before Into the Unknown responded, potentially during a gap of weeks. And in the statement that Into the Unknown provide alongside the emails, they've characterized the correspondence from Quackalope as a lot more sinister than it reads to me. For example, they say that Quackalope, quote, didn't respond to most of our suggestions, instead doubling down on reshooting the Aeon Trespass material, depicting Quackalope as if they were single-minded about getting the sponsorship and that there was ill intent behind that. But that's not strictly true. If we look at ITU's suggestions, they were more along the lines of asking Quackalope to not release any content and instead release content about their upcoming games instead, which frankly, as a content creator, I would ignore that suggestion as well. Out of hand, I wouldn't even mention it again, especially if I just spent 50 hours recording content on a game. I'm not scrapping that video because you don't like my conclusions. Nevertheless though, in my opinion, overall, I do absolutely see how Into the Unknown have perceived Quackalope as pressuring them to pay for a sponsorship, and I totally understand why they may have felt threatened by Quackalope, but then I kind of wonder, and I go back and I look at the emails and I think, why did they ask for a video months later? Why go back to this conversation? Why opening up this wound again? It doesn't make any sense to me. On the other hand, I think Quackalope came across as pressuring by accident, and it was a miscommunication on their part. Otherwise, they wouldn't have gone back in that later email and asked for rules help from the design team of Into the Unknown. It sounds like they did genuinely have problems with the rules, and the rules being difficult to parse is the main component of contention that they have in their review of Aeon Trespass, at least the negative one. And you can disagree if you think that the rules are easy or hard to parse, but that was their experience, and they didn't make that up, I think, to extort anybody. I think if their intention was to blackmail, they would have just been happy to take the money from Aeon Trespass and put out some blindly positive coverage and be done with it. Why insist on getting a designer in the room to help you actually present the game with accurate rules? But this has all gotten so messy and it's so interpretive. And we'll have to see how Quackalope respond because they're getting slammed right now by the internet. They are bleeding subscribers. This has really tarnished their reputation. Damn, you know? Oof. And if you appreciated this level-headed deep dive analysis and fancy some bonus videos and ad-free content and want to support me in doing this full-time and not getting biased by the big gaming consortium, then check out my Patreon at patreon.com/discoursminiatures, and a huge thanks to my patrons, especially Sonic Bread, CryptoKev, and Novini. And I'll catch y'all next time. Bye-bye. Okay, so edit. While editing this video, Quackalope released a response video. There is a link in the description of this video to it, but it's a half an hour long. And in the video itself, Quackalope basically reject the allegations of blackmail. They say that the content around Aeon Trespass had been recorded in January, and it wasn't released until now because Jesse is away in Israel for the last 5 weeks. They say that they don't know what the future of Quackalope looks like. They're worried that their relationship with publishers and other content creators have been irreparably damaged by these allegations, which I think is actually pretty fair. Yeah, I think it has. Boy, my old defamation ambulance chasing lawyer senses are a-tingling. Jesse also says that in future they'll be clear when sponsored content is produced and when they're paid. They say that they won't reach out to companies anymore in the future. They'll let companies reach out to them. And also they say that in the future they will focus on producing as accurate content as they can. Jesse apologizes for the confusion and have now taken down their review of Aeon Trespass and unlisted it as a show of good good faith to Into the Unknown, which I don't think that was necessary. Personally, I think that the thing that has not helped Quackalope here is the way that they've done their confirmation bias series. Is one video is all positive and one is all negative. I really recommend that they fix that. I'm curious to see what the internet's response will be to this reaction though, but if there's anything to go by, I suspect the internet will not be impressed. And I'll follow up if there's anything crazy that happens in the future. I'll follow up on all of this drama, so let's see what the future holds. I'll link a future video here or something else random, I guess. Bye!